Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick, founder of Verbal411.com. And today's video will be the beginning of what I'm going to be doing for March. Those of you who subscribe to me, thank you very much for following me, and hopefully I am giving you the information you need. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, please put them in the comment section down below. I'll see how I can help. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. Welcome. And if this is helpful towards your health and or optimizing your lifestyle, please subscribe. I do videos all the time in different subject matter, whether it's medical or nature therapy or new things I unbox. Share this with other people who are suffering, because I always think there's a way out of suffering. The way to heal is to get to the root cause of how it started and then try to reverse it. Now, if it's been 20 to 50 years, that will be hard to reverse, but there's still an option to do so. I experiment with different nutritional plans and definitely try to push the envelope with exercise. So I find that exercise is my grounding, and I use nutrition to supplant or feed the exercise. That's how I rationalize the value, because it's hard to diet. It's hard not to eat. It's hard to exercise when you're really busy. So I love self-experimenting, and I try to do it to keep my enthusiasm engaged. Currently, I'm moving away from carnivore, and I'm trying to maintain my numbers, meaning cholesterol, insulin, beta-hydroxybutyrate, the vitamins that I take. All those numbers are blood test results. I'm trying to maintain as I switch over to a different form of nutrition. And the information from Chris Gardner out of Stanford University, he just did something collaborating. These guys are also from Stanford, and they work in the microbiology department, but they have been studying like crazy the gut and the microbiome. And there was something called the Microbiome Project that the US government funded, and it was supposed to be really fantastic and revealing, and it would give us all the heat maps for what you need to have in your gut if you wanted to beat this cancer, what you needed in your gut if you wanted to turn off autoimmunity, what you needed to have in your gut, and how to fix your gut if you had leaky gut. But it wasn't really that revealing. In fact, it was a letdown. They found that there are more varieties of DNA in your gut than you have of your native DNA, which means that you carry a lot of different bacteria, foreign bacteria. But the plethora of what's known as the microbiota, or all those families in your gut, the combinations of everybody's microbiota, is what either will make or break you. So if you don't know about the digestive system, it's more than just a 27-foot tube that digests and pulls nutrition out of your food. It actually is a hormone producer, an immune response bank of white blood cells. It also helps to keep stuff that you don't need, toxins that your liver tried to get rid of. Try to keep that out. In some cases, if the microbiome, meaning the profile of different bacteria that you carry, are off, could be that you don't have enough good bacteria, or you have just enough bad bacteria to cause inflammation to trigger, or you've been hit with multiple antibiotics for reasonable purposes of infection. The antibiotics have not only killed the bad bacteria, they also killed your good bacteria. In many cases, if your gut is good, it can recover from a set of antibiotics. In some cases where it's back to back to back, especially if you're a kid with multiple ear infections, it could be that you've wiped out and it's irreversibly destroyed. You would think if you eat the right foods, you should be able to build up your microbiota properly, and I do have some videos on the gut. But if it's damaged and you continue to damage it with bad eating habits, not only will it be non-recoverable, you will have the filtration system of the gut lining, which is only one cell thick. You'll have that screwed up, miscalculating what to absorb, what to secrete. It'll actually turn on inflammatory process. 70% of the immune system are in the small intestine. They're called Peyer's patches, or gut-associated lymphoid tissue, GALT. I remember seeing that when I was studying anatomy back in pre-med, and I always thought, oh, that's cool. If you stain the part of the small intestine, you can see all these massive amounts of white blood cells for some reason in patches. But the reason that they're there is because that one cell that protects your insides from the stuff that you ate, it can mess up with its filtration. They're going from inside to outside. There's supposed to be an electrical charge, supposed to be a slime layer, supposed to be bacteria that sit in the slime layer. There's supposed to be a line, one cell thick columnar cells that secrete mucilage, and the bacteria create short chain fatty acids, white blood cells. And if you destroy the top 3 layers, all you got's the one cell and then the white blood cells to do the rest of the work. And the white blood cells will do the rest of the work, but they'll also be pissed off because they have to do so much work, and they'll start not only attacking the stuff inside the gut that's trying to get through, especially if you're eating bad food, toxins, irritants, alcohol. White blood cells will also, by mistake, turn around and attack cells. That's why a lot of people with ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, celiac, they have other symptoms aside from just gut. They'll have brain fog, they'll have joint pain, they'll have skin rashes. It's not just that digestive tube that's 27 feet from mouth to anus acts as a transit or a tube. It is a very functionable system. Stop ignoring the colon and the small intestine, because there's a lot of good things that can be modulated. So there's a study that Chris Gardner and Justin Sonnenberg came out with out of Stanford. Hopefully that's good enough for you to see. A great study, because that's the only information we had. I've always pushed getting fiber in. When I try to fix somebody's SIBO, leaky gut, bloat, maldigestion, IBS, constipation, diarrhea, varieties in between, I usually will first try to take away the offending agent, and then we'll try to take some slime in the form of fiber. The problem is, if you're keto, carnivore, or paleo, you're supposed to stay away from fiber in the form of grains, because that's really high in carbohydrate. And for those folks who are really strict, like 0 carbs, impossible. I think there's gradations of practice, and you can always modulate your own practice, add in some fiber sources. The hook is, we need fiber to feed the bacteria, but if you practice carnivore, keto, or paleo, you have to decrease your fiber, especially from grains. You can take in dark leafy greens, you can take in some legumes, some beans, some seeds, some nuts, but you have to be really careful, because a lot of that will push you into carbohydrate dominant state, and that usually takes you out of ketosis. I think there's ways to embrace that, because the data was always understood as being, if you increased your fiber, you would feed the different bacterial populations in your gut. But the study that they did, this is in 2021, Gardner specifically compared the high fiber diet with the diet that included fermented foods. So for those of you who don't know what fermented foods are, kimchi from Korea is a common fermented food. You take the food and you grow and age the food with bacteria. Some of you might like kimchi, some of you might not like the coldness of kimchi. There's also tofu. If you cook it, you'll destroy some of the bacteria in the tofu. Some of you will know kombucha. Kombucha is created tea, and it has bacteria in it. There's going to be some alcohol. All these things have bacteria loaded in the food sources. The theory is, although you eat salads and veggies and fruits and some raw vegetables, those foods will have bacteria, and the bacteria in the foods, whether it's cooked or raw, will eventually get into the system. And if your gut microbiome, the gang, the team, if they like the bacteria that's coming in the food, they'll take the bacteria. I call it fielding the team. For those of you who played kickball, play softball in grade school, you have 2 team captains, and each team captain will pick a person out of the class. God forbid, you always have the last person that's picked is not the desirable person. Usually the untalented person that's in the class, and it's like, oh, I'll take Joey. Regardless, you take and hopefully get the best picks. It's almost like draft day. Well, your gut microbiome is a live bunch of organisms. Your microbiome will accept more bacteria, whether it's from food or whether it's from intentional fermented food. The data that Gardner came up with was that the inflammatory markers with the patients who just had a high fiber diet, and I'm just paraphrasing this, but the data showed that the people that were given the fermentable food or the fermented foods actually had lower inflammatory markers than the people that had high fiber diet. And obviously the fermented foods will have a little bit of fiber, but the power of fermented foods is that they have a ton of bacteria. I've always been cautious with this because I get a lot of people with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. To surmise what that means is you usually have bacteria that will be gas formers. If you have too many bacteria that will produce either methane or hydrogen, that will be painful, especially if the balance between good bacteria and the gas formers is off. If you have only a little bit of good bacteria and a whole bunch of gas formers, that will be nothing but bloat every time you eat something. And that's just a challenge, and that's painful every time you eat. That's very demoralizing. For those of you who have issues where you're trying to build up your immunity, build up your gut microbiome, the caution that Chris Gardner had was they ramped up the exposure to the fermentable foods. If you go 110% all fermentable, your gut will accept the new guys. The new guys, if they're overwhelming the current population, you'll have nothing but gas. So you have to work your way into and wean up on the exposure to the fermentable foods. These are just 3 different fermentable foods. There's others out there that you can easily find online, but you can pick your choice of which fermentable food and try to introduce it in a stepwise fashion. Read the data yourself, but the bottom line was at the end of the study, when they pulled the inflammatory markers from the patients that were given the fermentable food, but during both parts of the crossover, had better anti-inflammatory effects from the fermentable foods. So that's the bottom line with this, is that an option, if you're pure keto, pure carnivore, or paleo, and you want to really decrease the carbohydrate footprint, I think this might be better than trying to get in the slime, the fiber, and then the probiotic. If you do the classic way, that's all explained in my gut videos. Garlic to decrease and feed only good bacteria and starve bad bacteria. That in the morning. Ginger at night has a prokinetic. Psyllium or slippery elm or marshmallow root has your slime layer. And then a probiotic. Usually I'll start with Saccharomyces and I'll build up depending on what we're trying to do. Burn fat, build muscle. There's a couple of different bacteria to shoot for. These guys actually come with bacteria, so you don't have to take any probiotics. Always novel to take a probiotic after you finish the antibiotic. I think it's a pretty good source. The data is showing that people who have been given antibiotic, whether they're rebooted with probiotics or not, they still, if the gut is working properly and there's good slime and a good diet and good calming practice, you have to have that. You can't just be stressed out all the time. You will actually be able to repopulate and recover your gut microbiome. If you have a lot of disease, including the gut, and you're on a bad diet, and you have reflux, and you have H. pylori, and you have allergies to food and environment, and you're constantly angry, all those things will not allow these guys to do their magic. I think it's important to choose your nutrition practice properly. If you don't know what to do, you can certainly consult me on my Herbal 411 website, or you can find your own registered dietitian, nutritionist, or somebody that's been trained to give you a personalized practice for nutrition, and that can maybe adopt it to supplement your exercise. It's important to also know about medical disease because you can't ignore the medical disease, and sometimes making the wrong choices will flare up your disease process. There's also shortcuts that I'll be talking about all in the month of March. So again, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Otherwise, I will be doing more information or more data as we go on hacking your system to optimize your health faster. I mean, think about it. We're already into spring. I have something called the Shamrock Shuffle. It's coming up in less than 3 weeks, and I have to get ready for an 8K, and I have only been hiking, so I'm going to really ramp up my training, and I'll be talking about that. Why do I invest in all this stuff? Why do I hike to 14,000 feet? Because I want to increase my motivation to maintain that optimization. Honestly, everybody else is not exercising and eating whatever they want and drinking beer, and I'm like, oh, shoot. But if I at least substitute all those things for healthy, cool things, cold showers, cold immersion, meditation, hiking in nature, nature therapy, communing with other people that are like-minded, prayer, religion, trying to get some good sleep and exercise, I think that's just as good, especially being 60, because I'm more sensitive than an average 20-year-old is to damage. Maybe it's because I'm wiser, I'd like to think, but it's also probably because I'm lower in testosterone. But bottom line, there's beautiful things that can come about when you turn 60, 70, 80. There's also beautiful things when you're 20. If you think about it, it's better to retire independent, with the ability to travel, with a ton of knowledge up here, and with the minimal amount of diseases as possible. And how are you going to do that? You have to invest when you're in your 20s. I started bodybuilding when I was 18 going on 19, and I've not stopped. I don't compete anymore, but I will always be an athlete in my mind, and I'll continue to use that as my first form of prevention for disease. So please put any comments down below as far as how you use fermentable foods or the experience you've had with fermented. I bet it's going to be gassy versus fiber. Or if you are a carnivore practitioner and you're trying to get in and help those bacteria, you need fiber. Honestly, you need fiber. I mean, there's beautiful things with carnivore. I'll put a link down below as how it treated my cholesterol. It lowered it compared to when I was a vegan. If you don't have a doctor that's integrative medicine, check out the link I'll put down below. Maybe you can find one around you, or it can be one of my patients and see me from a distance. Thanks for watching up to this point in time. Otherwise, stay healthy, and I'll see you at the next video.